ridiculous. A life lived, as I said, for self is not true success. It's something else. I don't even know quite what it is, but it's not success, certainly the way I view it. I deal with a lot of people who are fairly wealthy, who I would never consider successes. Why? Because their life is a mess. They made a lot of money. They did very well at it. That's good, but at what cost? At the cost of your family, at the cost of your marriage, at the cost of having no friends at the end of that? Who wants that life? Who wants that? Define success in your terms. That's very, very important. But you know what? Plan for what you want too. That doesn't say you shouldn't plan. You need to plan too. There's 3 books that I think are really terrific that you need to read before you leave Haute. Now, how many people have heard of the book, What Color is Your Parachute? Okay. You must read that book. And it's a pretty good read. You could probably read it over a weekend. The work on it will probably take you months to do, but it really is a great, great book. If you are in a place where you say, what do I really want to do with my life? What direction do I really want to go? Read that book. Great book. And it's not really hard to read. And I'll just encapsulate it in a paragraph. The premise that What Color is Your Parachute makes, and by the way, this title is really about the notion that in life you really have to have a parachute. You have to have a plan B at all times. But the idea here is that things that happened in your life, the history of you and the history of me gives really important clues to what you'll be successful in the future. And I'm going to come to this in a second. I really think that what I'm really passionate about, what I tell people at work is, every person in this room is endowed with unique abilities. Now, your GPA may be 2.5, others may be 3.5. That's not the issue. You do some things, you have some abilities that no one else in the world was given. You really do. And I think part of life, part of the enjoyment of life, is figuring out what those are. And it's not given to you sometimes really easily. Sometimes you got to work real hard. Sometimes you got to go through loss to find what it is that you find you can do. I think this book is really a tremendous reference to doing that, so I would suggest you read it. That's one book you should read. The second book is a book by Stephen Covey called First Things First, and it's when you discover what you do. It talks about creating the right priorities in your life. How do you decide, given that I can do a bunch of different things, how do I decide what's the important thing to do? It's a great book to read. And then finally, the last one, which is really a fun book by Buckingham out of the Gallup Group, Now Discover Your Strengths. I really strongly recommend it to you. I'll tell you this interesting story that he relates in the previous book that he wrote to that. It's about table tennis player. There was a table tennis player, ping pong player in China, who had a very, very weak backhand. If you managed to hit the ball to his backhand side, you basically could beat him. And so typically what you would be told is, to get better, what you should do is work on your weakness. He turns it on his head and he said, you know what? You don't get better actually by working on your weaknesses. You get better by developing your strengths. He tells this story of this table tennis player who developed the most devastating forehand there was and basically became a world champion, having basically no backhand. The point he makes in the book, and the point that this book really does well, is it basically says this: all of us have certain strengths. If you want to be successful and you want to enjoy life, you got to be in the zone where you're working with your strengths. And it really is a terrific book that's got a lot of materials there for you to explore. What are your strengths? So you read all those 3, you'll get a very, very clear direction for the things that you ought to be doing. Now, let me talk a little bit about planning, because I think planning is really important. Each of us will have a different balance in our lives around work and career. For some people, I think career will occupy a small piece of that pie, for some bigger. Decide beforehand what it is that is unique to you and how you want to do that. But you need to recognize that there are trade-offs. Sometimes you trade off your work for your family, for your career, for your friends, for service, for all of those. You need to decide what the balance of that is. Decide it beforehand, before you get deep into a career that demands all of your time and you feel very unhappy about that. You decide how much of that you want to dedicate. But I will say this is my experience in many years now of business. The more education and experience you have, the more options you have, not only in your career, but in all areas of your life. I like to learn. I think I could just serially keep studying the rest of my life. That happened to me sometime in midlife. I'm not sure what clicked. But I will tell you this, that part of the reason why I've been able to do all the things that I've done in business is I have a lot of experience in education. So when something goes wrong at work, I generally get a call to figure out to be part of the team. The more education and experience, never stop learning. You know, I know that for you, those of you who are senior, you can't wait to get out of here. And opening another book in your life after that is just not something you're interested in. You know what? Stay with that feeling for about 3 months, but then ignore it. You know, you will have to, for the rest of your life, be learning new things. Not collecting degrees necessarily, but learning new things. I think that's what makes life interesting, makes life enjoyable. It also gives you options. It really does. Let me talk about foxes and hedgehogs. Foxes are very valuable because foxes know a lot of different things about a lot of different areas. That's what a fox is. Hedgehogs are very valuable for a different reason. They know one thing. They know how to burrow, but boy, they know how to burrow. Figure out in your life whether you're more of a fox or a hedgehog. Don't get caught in a career which requires you to be a hedgehog when you're actually a fox. Think about it. Do you like doing a lot of different things, or do you like to burrow down and do something? In companies, it takes all kinds of people to make it work. So I think about people who are deep, wonderful technical specialists. You sit down and you ask them about a complicated tax problem. They will take you 2 hours later, you'll still be talking to them. That generates energy for them. That's what they enjoy. Other people can't stand it. After 5 minutes, they jump off the chair and start walking around. Think about who you are. I like to think about it, this analogy of foxes and hedgehogs. Don't be a fox caught in a hedgehog's hole, or vice versa. Let me talk about strengths, and then we're going to get to Stephen Jobs in a second. I really think that when you think about what you do well, you don't have to have worked at all. Each of us, if you go back and think about your life, has at this point, a certain amount of ability, training, and education. But you know what? That alone is not enough. Having the education, the training, and ability, and even doing well in class, doing well in your major, isn't enough if you're not, at the bottom, also motivated to do certain things. Now, what's really magical, what's really fun, what transforms work and what transforms life into play, is when the combination of your ability, training, and education meets the things you're motivated to do. When that happens, that's what a strength is. I call it sort of the power zone. That's when you operate at your best, when you do best. So really, one of the things that I would challenge you to think about is, you're studying business. Business is a pretty wide field for those of you who are doing it. What area of those really seem interesting to you? That's a really important clue as to where you should go. And then second, are you motivated to do it? And you know what motivation means. It's that feeling you have when you don't want to go to the library to study and you know you should go to study. What are the things that, when you pick up the book, really excite you about studying, and what are the things that don't? Really pay attention to that. Those are really important things. Because I'm going to contend this, that when in your life you operate in this zone, you tend to do your best. And you know, if there's a tragedy I see sometimes, is that I see people who've never discovered what their strengths are, never discovered where their motivation. They sort of plod through life. Don't be one of those people. Find where you are motivated, where your strengths lie, and stay there. Do that. And that could be an area of service. It doesn't mean it necessarily in business. I like this quote from George MacDonald, the Scottish preacher.